Shikhar, how are you?
I'm doing great,
Long
sir.
time.
Sir, how are you?
Very well, very well.
So, how was the day, sir, today?
Today was good. I ran the marathon this Sunday, so
Wow.
I've been recovering for the last few days to
That's one
get
of your
back to my
passions,
run
we
on
know.
Monday.
Sure, sure.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah,
So, Pankaj, we'll start with some few questions for our viewers to get the learnings from it. So, Pankaj, you have over spent 25 years in the financial sector space and moving now to the shared services space. How different and difficult has it been for you to manage client expectations was one of our questions.
sure. So Shikhar, I started as a management consultant, which is, as you know, a very, very client-focused industry where
Sure,
you're almost working from client premises and things like that.
sure.
From then on, I moved into banking, where I was in the relationship side with ICICI.
Right.
Again, sort of a lot of good client connects and so on. Moved to G, where I became more of a slightly of a back office person because I was working in risk management underwriting, where the client connect sort of reduces, at least the external client connect. You have your
Okay.
internal stakeholders, all that. And after that, I entered the shared services world through Standard Chartered and Dell and others.
Sure.
So I think in some ways, I've been moving backward from a totally front-ending role in my consulting days
Sure.
to sort of now doing a bit of a strategy role for an offshore entity here.
Sure.
So I think the change that happens is when you have external clients and external customers, the approach that you have is slightly different because there it's all very very here and now. A very strong focus on commercials and so on,
Okay.
which is actually really good.
Right.
And sometimes when you come behind and sort of get into this offshoring in a back office space, you also miss that commercial orientation because
Right.
for various reasons, because you are a cost center, that focus on the commercial side tends to reduce, which is a bit unfortunate. And I think all of us try to make sure that we don't get into that spiral of not understanding the commercial mindedness. But it, I think, is a bit of a nature of the beast that I have seen over the years.
Sure.
The other thing is that given that the stakeholders now seem to be far more internal, I think you kind of miss that external client interface and orientation and all that. So while you have internal stakeholders, but they're not really customers of the bank. So therefore, I think being in the offshore, delivery space, the nature of engagement changes from being more commercial, more front end to more internal stakeholder.
Sure.
Both have a reason to exist, and we need both to survive. So I do think that they are different and both relevant in a large company.
But again, the cherry on the top question here that whom will be more difficult to manage, the internal clients or the external clients?
Actually, you know what? It's very interesting that both are sometimes difficult to manage. Depends on the stage of your company and so on.
Sure.
Because external clients are if you are in a very monopoly oriented business,
Sure.
then it's kind of, I would say that even if you're in the front end, it's easier to probably manage client expectation. I would imagine that if you are heading sales for Google, for example, I'm quite sure that it might be an easier job versus maybe selling computers, which is a far
True.
more low margin commoditized business. So I think
Yeah.
depending on the nature of your competitive position, the job will be difficult or hard.
Sure.
Even when you are in a back office oriented environment, there are some companies who have a culture of using their internal teams, and there are some others who have a culture of using external vendors.
Okay.
So if you happen to be in the first type of company and sitting in an internal team, you have a hard time managing internal stakeholders because they are so used to using vendors,
Right.
and you suddenly trying to sort of convince them that it makes sense to build certain capabilities in house. So like I said,
Yes.
it depends on your competitive
Perfect.
position, the nature of the company, their culture, what
Right.
their beliefs are, and
Sure.
so on.
Sure. Well, thanks for answering that, Pankaj. So, Pankaj, we are all talking about talent transformation worldwide. All the Fortune companies are speaking about it. So, do you see some shift in the way how capability centers used to manage talent transformation initiatives a decade before versus now?
Yeah.
So,
So I would say that I could look at some of these things at three levels. One is our own way that we are educating our children, or how the education system is evolving. Two, how our companies are training people, and three, how individuals are thinking about their own careers and upgrading their skills and so on. I think everyone, wherever they are, do realize that the previous era was more of a incremental improvement, continuous improvement, Six Sigma type era, where things were sort of linear. I think over the last, I would say, close to a decade, after the digital disruptors have come in,
Sure.
we all know that incremental is gone. It's all very disruptive, and it is more leapfrogging and moving from one to the other, and there is no pattern in that this thing.
Sure.
So therefore, the era of learning for a while and then reaping the benefits for a long time is over.
Right.
So gone are the days when we would feel that you have this 20 years of education and then you do 30 years of working.
Sure.
My dad did that. He educated himself for 20 years and worked for the next 40 years. My grandfather did that. I think in my era that notion is starting to break down, and I know certainly that in my daughter's era it would definitely have broken down.
Sure.
So I actually tell my daughter that do your undergrad, work for a while, figure out what you want to do, then maybe do your master's, then maybe do another activity which might be relevant.
Sure.
So I don't think you can do a 6 or 7 year of college education and hope that you will work for 30 years. I think you have to break down your education.
Definitely.
And similarly, I think companies are also doing the same. Earlier people would train people for 3 months, 6 months. Now I think people are becoming more agile, that give you a bite-sized knowledge and then over time do that. Individuals are doing the same thing. They are going to online courses. They are doing many other ways of grading skills. So I think education is now becoming more bite-sized, more continuous. But the education system is obviously harder to change because it is in a certain way. There are experiments happening, but I think that's the one which is the last bastion which needs to fall.
Because wonderful, but I have a question here related to the same talent transformation piece we spoke about. So while you say that there is a paradigm of for our kids to go to a school, then college, and then graduate from a university in India or abroad, is the similar way the organizations are also thinking about it. So can you state one example where you have seen the organizations really going towards the adaptive continuous learning with their own employees, and do not want to force them for joining certain 2 days interventions or doing some online courses? So how do they solve this by design? If I need to ask you about that, yeah.
I think a lot of companies and vendor partners have come into play who have all of these digital platforms, and I have seen in our own company and in several other companies where the companies are providing that platform and allowing team members to choose what they want to learn.
Okay.
I think what I heard last was in most of these cases, this whole data science field has become so popular that in one particular case, 80% of the people were learning Python. So I do think that while it is good to give people a choice, I don't know whether everyone really knows how to exercise their choice.
Right.
And I would say that actually that's true for a lot of different decisions, not just about learning.
Sure.
Because I do think that today there are so many choices, including what toothpaste should I buy next, that people are a bit not sure. And frankly, whatever decision they chase, they always think that they took a suboptimal decision because there was something else which was better. So I think people are faced with a hard choice. But today I don't know, or I don't think I know any company that has figured it out and know what to do. So I do think experiments happening, allowing people to do things, then somewhere nudging people to do certain things because they think that is important for that company and things of that nature. But I do think that this place is still evolving.
Right.
I don't know whether people have figured out. And I still think that the older face-to-face learning environment, collaborative learning, in-place learning still has a room to play, because a lot of people starting to believe that education has become digital and you can just go online and learn everything. I do think that a lot of practical learning happens in a classroom environment and so on. In fact, I would argue that the skill of the future will be probably more human skills than digital skills, because some of those actually might just get automated. So I don't know that the older learning modules are not as extinct as people want to think those are going to be. So I still think both will have.
That's a wonderful point, Pankaj, because I have served Manipal for some time, and we used to say to our students that you learn whenever, wherever. And the question used to ask from us that when is the time to do that? When you're giving that so much of liberty to ask to people that learn at their own leisure, but are they doing it? So at times, I mean, very valid point that we need to have a regime, we have to have a discipline around learning, and it only happens once you have a face-to-face, some human intervention going into some paradigm of time. So that's great to learn, Pankaj. And also, we want to understand that we're talking about economic slowdown here. With excess use of AI coming into the picture, we can see any companies with the name .ai. We can see plethora of companies who are into technology now. So what advice would you like to give to aspirants who are seeking career in the shared services center? We have almost like 980 shared services companies in India, and I'm still growing. So what would be your recommendation for them if they seek career, both from a fresher and experience point of view? Yeah.
I have gone to some colleges and I meet a lot of young students and about career advice. My advice to folks have been that my generation spent a lot of time working for foreign companies, because those were the new entrants into the economy. They created a lot of value over the last 25 years. So in my generation, I do think that globalization, liberalization created new opportunities. Both Indian and foreign companies came in, and all of us benefited from that. My personal view, and that's what I'm actually telling my daughter, so I can say that that's what I believe in.
Sure.
That the future, a lot of things will happen in India itself.
Okay.
In my generation, it was almost believed that a lot of things will either happen abroad or if you work for a foreign company in India.
Okay.
I believe that the Indian economy, which will become hopefully the $5 trillion economy at some point in time, and then another $10 trillion at another point in time, and so
Sure.
on. So I think that there's so many more opportunities that will get created in
Come.
India, that people should not ignore the Indian company or Indian economic opportunity,
Sure.
and consider that also as a positive. And I
Right.
do see a lot of people these days joining startups, becoming part of the Indian corporate ecosystem.
Right.
I also think that the India stack and the Digital India type of campaigns are making our economy also very efficient
Right.
and allowing a lot of new innovations to happen, which can't happen in many other parts of the
Sure.
world. So I'm actually, contrary to many other people, much more bullish on the India side of the employment opportunity than from a global side of it. The other reason for me to believe in some of that is that I think my generation, again, the last 25 years, I would say, was an era of globalization.
Sure.
I think we are sort of entering into a bit of an era of deglobalization where countries are feeling that they have liberalized too much, and the benefit of that global trade hasn't percolated down to the poor people in those countries.
Sure.
So there is a bit of a trade war. There's a bit of a walls coming up and not allowing a lot of movement to
Right.
happen. So therefore, my belief of a deglobalized future, coupled with a upcoming Indian economy, makes me believe that betting on the Indian ecosystem and employment
Still a
is a
safer
good
bet.
one.
Sure.
Not to ignore what we are doing, but
Sure.
I think not to sort of, in the past they were totally ignored.
Sure.
I think we should consider both and figure out where the
Right.
opportunities are. And I don't think we should think of them as two different things. People should be able to
Sure.
move around from one to the
Sure.
other.
So Pankaj, I mean, you travel the world. You've been seeing the countries who want to come to India. So I was witness to talk to somebody in the Japanese Trade Business Association yesterday, and they mentioned that Shikhar, not only even the startups want to come to India, it's the large companies who also want to set up in India. So what is your perspective around the new nations that you see and travel who want to come to India, and why they see India as one of the places they want to set up their centers?
Yeah. I think the one trend that I see, that in the past we were very Western looking.
Okay.
A lot of things were coming from US or Europe and so on. I think in the recent past there's been a lot of interest from the East, and you mentioned Japan.
Right.
I would mention Southeast Asia, even China. In fact, a lot of people from China are working in India, trying to
Right.
look at startup opportunities and some of these things.
Right.
If you just look at the private equity flows, in the past all the VC money used to come mostly from the West.
Yes.
Now we have seen Japanese money also
Investing,
flowing
yes.
into our
Wonderful.
ecosystem.
True.
So I think the world is sort of becoming more global and more balanced.
Sure.
I think the only purely Western orientation is sort of shifting, and a
Right.
lot of East is also coming into play.
Influencing it.
So
Yeah.
I think that people should be open and even
Sure.
continue to look East as well, and not just look West.
Sure, sure. Because you've been part of so many accelerators, but you're a mentor to a lot of companies. So I have a very important question to ask to you here. That I see a lot of startup companies who have the guys have been to US. They did some PG UG course there, and they started their own company. And there I can see the shift for them to coming back to India and starting their product. So my question to you is that as a market fitment of HR products or CRM or technologies, how do you see the larger pie of the revenue or the market share with the Indian market as of now compared to last 10 years?
Yeah. I think the first thing to note is that GDP size does matter.
Okay.
All said and done, we are a $2 trillion economy, and US is a $20 trillion economy. They are far more developed in terms of infrastructure and many other things which are in place to allow businesses to prosper.
Sure.
So at least what I have observed is, at least in my ecosystem, if someone wants to really scale very quickly, they have figured out that still US is the place to be.
Right.
I have seen many people who started here then realized that they should actually go to the Bay Area or go
Right,
to the
right.
US. So I still think that we are still not as good as what people could do elsewhere. Although it is changing, we have seen
Right.
unicorns coming here, more will happen. But if you were to look at this point in time, if there was a new entrepreneur, for many of these products and services that they make, especially in the B2B space,
Right.
India is a difficult place to be. Now
Okay.
B2C of course is a different matter, which is where I think most of the unicorns have been created.
Sure.
So I still think B2B US is the place to be. B2C India is the place to be.
Wonderful.
But in future, I think there are so many other B2B players which are coming even to cater to the Indian market.
Sure.
So that is transforming. But
Sure.
today I would still feel at least based on my experience and friends of mine, that
Sure.
US is where I think the market for B2B is more mature.
Wonderful, wonderful. So Pankaj, we know that you're a marathoner and you love to run and when make people run also. We have a question that, I mean, on how is Pankaj on a Sunday? How does a day look to you on a weekend? So give us some perspective around how do you like to spend your time? What are your activities and so on?
So I have almost routinized my entire week. By and large, you can predict where I will be and what will I be doing, because it's all sort of very this thing. So I have stopped taking those decisions on what I need to do when. So the weekdays are pretty straightforward. 10:30 to 6:30 the sleep time. Get up, get ready by 7:45. 7:45 to 8:30 is office going time. Usually spent talking to people, getting to know
Sure.
what's going on. Spend time in office. So 5 days a week is really devoted to office. There isn't too much, going on there.
Sure.
Saturdays, Sundays are devoted to other activities. So the mornings on Saturday is a long run, about 30 odd kilometers,
Sure.
which is really a conversation. We're talking to people while running and getting to know what's going on elsewhere in the world,
Sure.
followed by breakfast. Sunday is similar, a 10-kilometer run. So the idea is to
Wow.
be marathon ready all the time, which is
Sure.
why I was able to do the marathon last Sunday
Sure.
with no practice.
And how
And
has
the
been?
evenings are actually spent playing badminton.
Oh, wow.
I also like watching movies with my wife and other friends.
Sure.
So those are the few things that I do on the
Sure.
weekend: running, badminton, movies.
Wonderful, wonderful. I mean, I tried at times to influence my wife to do yoga, and I never tried the next time. So at times, I mean, how is your influencing? I mean, how do you motivate your family members to be more fit, more agile, and more in caution? I mean, how is your?
I realize that it's very hard and probably maybe not even right to motivate anyone. I think if we can just motivate ourselves,
Yeah,
and then whoever else has to be motivated based on our motivation will get motivated. So
wonderful.
in my home, my two daughters have got slightly motivated to run, so they have both done at least half a marathon,
Acha,
but
okay.
they are all for the event and not doing it on a regular basis.
Sure.
My wife has some other interest. She's into yoga.
Okay.
She's into art and painting,
Oh,
so she
wow.
has a lot of interest in those areas, and she spends time
Sure.
following her passion.
Sure. Sure. So great, Pankaj. I think we had a brilliant time with you, learning about the market space and your personal interests also. And we continue to have more conversations with you and make sure we have the right perspectives for the audience who could learn from you more. And it was a brilliant session with you, Pankaj. Thanks.
Thank you, Shikhar. Thanks
Pleasure.
as